All right, hi there. This video is about backwards design. All right, so this is an approach to lesson planning where you start with whatever the desired outcome is first. Right, so what are the objectives, and then you plan back from there. All right, so this is different than what may be seen a lot of times in that we come up with a really good idea. Here's an activity we want to do or whatever it is, and we come up with that. And then we try to figure out, oh, how does that tie into the actual learning objectives, right? And so we just want to actually start from the end and not from the beginning. So we're not going to think about what we're going to do yet and then figure out how it all figures into everything. We're not going to figure out how to teach it and how to assess it, but rather we're going to start with the outcomes, right? So what do we want our students to have learned? What outcomes are there that we are wanting to meet? Once we have that identified, then we go back and see, next, what are the assessments we're going to do? How do we determine whether or not they've met those objectives or they've done the learning that we want them to do? And then once we have the assessments in place, now we know what we need to teach. All right, so 3 key elements of this backwards design model is 1, identifying the desired results. 2, determining acceptable evidence, right? So what it's going to, in terms of assessments, what's going to actually help us to know. And then 3, then planning the activities or the approach to learning that you're going to do with the students. So if we compare this to traditional planning, we tend to focus, again, more on the activities or covering the content, and that may or may not help us actually reach the overall objectives, right? So we need to start with the objectives and start with that kind of in mind first and then do all the planning. As far as if you need to, sometimes the learning objectives are provided for you, right? So these are maybe common core standards, other things like that, like this is what it is. Other times you may be the ones determining what the objectives are. And so this is where Bloom's taxonomy comes in. I know a lot of people are already familiar with this, but it has the different levels of learning, and it's kind of, this is what we would do to kind of develop the student learning outcomes, right? So whenever we are developing a class here, what we will do is use Bloom's taxonomy a lot of times and use some of those same things to kind of help us start planning out and writing out the specific learning objectives. All right, so once we establish what we want students to learn, we have to decide how we're going to determine the assessment process. And so what we want to see is what we call instructional alignment. We want some congruence between the learning objectives, learning activities, and the assessment. Right? So, for example, if we have the objective in mind and we develop a test as part of that learning process, whatever learning activities we have then, whether it's lecture or whatever other engagement activities, it's more likely to cover what's needed and help reduce student uncertainty because we already know what the assessment's going to be. Right, so objectives, assessments, and then planning out the different learning activities. Now, as far as actually implementing that instruction, there are a variety of methods. If you look at the college level, it typically tends to be lecture. You're probably not going to see that as much in elementary, middle school, and high school. You'll see it a little bit, but not nearly as much. If it's done for like very brief amount of time. But we have lecture. There's also simulations, right? So this is where you are actually doing an experiment or something like that to simulate what something would be. You can just present examples as well, either through videos or just explaining things. You can use things along the lines of the Socratic method and just questioning students and asking them how much they know and understand, or just trying to help them to think a little bit deeper about different things. Group work is always an option as well. It's best when it's guided and there's a plan in place and you're kind of there to support and everything. And then if they're working on either group work or individual work, it's just being there and providing feedback as well. So like monitoring how they're doing as they are engaging in it, and then what can we do to give them the feedback, like how they're doing and how they can improve. So yeah, backwards design is actually a very effective way for planning, and it's something that all of us should consider more often.